On the Choose to Think podcast, I will encourage and empower you to engage and optimize your best thought life in practical, meaningful ways so that you can live day by day in joy, peace, and God's purpose despite all externals. This is Victoria, and welcome back to the Choose to Think podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back, I should say, to the Choose to Think podcast. I'm so delighted that you're here and that you're taking time out of your day to tune in and find a good dose of inspiration. On today's show, I have Cameron and Susan Mills. Now, they have both been on the show before. I'm sure you'll remember. I jotted down back episode 80. Cameron came on and talked about leaving his ego and self-esteem on the bench, so to speak. And then Susan was back on a couple months after that because Cameron talked so fondly of her during that particular episode that I had with him that I thought, man, I need to get Susan on the show. And she graciously agreed to come on. We talked about parenting a child on the autism spectrum disorder, or how do I say that?
Autism spectrum.
That's the way I have it. Okay. And so it was such an engaging conversation, and I'm so delighted with them. And one thing that I noticed is just how they speak about each other. And so many of you are married. And so I wanted to have them back on together to chat about marriage. And I really just have a couple of questions for them. And I think it's going to unfold, our conversation will unfold so nicely for you. But since the podcast is all about thoughts, taking our thoughts captive, being transformed through the renewing of our minds, I wanted to unpack a little bit some thoughts that we should have in our marriage and perhaps some thoughts that we should not have in our marriage. And we can kind of ask them what they think about this particular topic. So and I don't know which one of you wants to start, but maybe Susan, ladies first. If you could isolate.
I have a lot. I can go. I have a lot to say about it.
I won't get through a full sentence, so I'll just warn you. Okay.
I love it. Oh my goodness. No, I even have other questions. My listeners might want to know even your history, like where you met and how long you've been married. I think you're still on your honeymoon, actually. But if you want to just tell them where you met before we get into the really more kind of meaningful content.
Yeah. Well, I'll start and I'll have you wrap up.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
And I'll add in color.
Of course, the color commentary is what he's best at. So we actually met first as friends, and we had some mutual friends that were kind of pushing us together, and he was probably fighting back stronger than I was. But it ended up working out perfect because we got to know each other on a friend level. And there were some awkward times when all of us were going out together as friends, and our friends were making some awkward comments about us, being together, and we won't go into details there, but
I think we should. I think it's a great story. It's the best story. It's the best story about us. So
yeah,
the two mutual friends, and they're still dear friends of ours who are best friends who are pushing us together, because Susan and I don't know each other, and then we do, but we're just, neither one of us were looking for a relationship. And so, but these two friends of ours were actively looking for us to have a relationship. And so we would do things like, I remember, I guess the first time even though I know when the first time we met, but we went to, one of our mutual friends had a birthday dinner, and we went, it was just the two of them and Susan and I. And every time Susan and I would talk across the table, these two would immediately hush because they wanted to hear, oh, let's see if they're connecting. And so that made it awkward. Even later on that night, we wound up walking to another place to kind of extend the evening. And then Susan was going to leave early. And I was told, first of all, I was going to do it anyway, because I was the only man there. So I was told, well, it's now 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, maybe. She's got a 2-mile walk back to her car downtown Lexington. And I was like, I'm not letting her walk by herself. So I'd already decided I was going to walk. But I was then commanded by the other two girls, you're walking her back. I'm like, y'all calm down. I know I'm doing it. But then the awkward time came when it was your birthday. It was
Which
her
is like
birthday
a month
dinner
later.
a month later.
Yes.
And so, number one, I showed up forgetting that we were celebrating her birthday. I just thought we were getting together as friends. So I didn't have any flowers for her. I didn't have a present for her. I didn't have a card for her. So that was awkward. But then our mutual friend decided, again, this was all set up for her to push us together. She said, okay, so she, cling on the glass. I haven't, a toast to make or dedication, whatever. She goes, we're here to celebrate Susan. And she gushed about Susan for about 20 or 30 seconds, maybe even a minute. And then she goes, I thought it would be wonderful if we all went around the table. Now, what we're expecting to hear is, and talked about our favorite
Share
thing
your
about,
favorite moment.
What's your favorite moment with Susan, or your favorite thing about Susan? And she specifically goes into, this is her announcement. I think it'd be great if we go around the table and everybody shares their favorite part of Susan's body.
Oh my word.
And
You're
I'm like,
hitting me.
So I was,
and this is another woman who came up with this idea. This is a man coming up with this idea. I completely get a man thinking in terms of, but because I copied I was going to be the second person to go too, which my heart rate, I mean, it's bouncing in my throat. And so the first person to go was one of our friends pushing us together, named Tamara, who said her eyes are so beautiful. So I instantly oh yes, her eyes.
That too.
I think I'd agree with Tamara. I think Susan's eyes are her best quality. And I'm like, and no one was comfortable, because everyone was like, well, what are they going to mention, her rear end? If anyone had mentioned that, I mean, now it just gets awkward. So it was just such a dumb idea. But it's still the funniest thing. It encapsulates these two friends' desire to get us together, which, because they desired it so badly, we rebelled against each other for a while,
especially towards the end. But I tell you, it was after that though. Also, there were two guys that were hitting on me. It sparked a little bit of jealousy.
They were at the party. Were they at the party?
At the dinner. No. At the dinner.
Okay.
There were these two clowns sitting at this other table who bought the entire we had 8 people at our table. They bought the entire round of our table of drinks just so they could talk to Susan.
Oh my.
And so, and now I don't like Susan at this point. We're not dating. We're being pushed together, but we're both rebelling against it. I don't think it'll work out. And then all of a sudden this happens, and all of a sudden I'm getting jealous at the table, and I'm like, I don't like her. Why am I jealous? And then I had to admit, well, there's got to be something there. If I'm getting jealous with these two guys hitting on this girl that I've decided I'm not interested in.
So it was so awkward that I sent him a text. I think it was like the next week or something.
I thought it was the next day, but maybe not.
I think it was the next week.
Anyway.
I can't remember. Anyway, I said, listen, there is no chance that we're ever even going to be able to be friends if we don't lay this awkwardness out on the table
and get rid of our two mutual friends.
Yes. So I said, do you want to grab coffee? And so he said, well, how about dinner? And so a couple weeks later,
like a gentleman
like a week later, and we had what turned out to be, and I still don't consider it a date.
I do.
He does. But like a 5-hour, we closed the restaurant down, then we walked next door to go to another place that stayed open a little bit longer, and we ended up closing them down. So and then just kind of walked away thinking, well, maybe there is something, to this. So anyway, long story short, we started dating and then in October
of 19.
Yeah. And then got married in August of 2020.
Okay.
So,
perfect.
And all because of COVID, because COVID kind of accelerated our relationship, because we started going from spending a weekend together when we were both working regular jobs and regular hours to when COVID started, it shut down. I couldn't travel anymore, which is basically what I did most of the time. We went from seeing each other every week to every other day. And that accelerated everything to the point where we were married. I guess if COVID started in March of 2020, we were married August of 2020. So.
Right. Well, what body part did you say? Can you share that?
Oh yeah, I can tell. I copied off Tamara. She said eyes. I said her eyes.
Oh, you said that. I thought that was like, okay, that was a good
I'm not
thing
an idiot.
to say.
Well, I mean, I can be an idiot.
Okay.
But no, I
so you
Tamara's
used the same one.
saved me because I was panicked. I didn't know what, I wasn't thinking. It was like, what can I say that doesn't get me in trouble? And honestly, the only thing I could have said her mind. That would have been a brilliant answer.
Well,
but
Steve said something. He said, let me see your smile. It's your smile.
Oh my
Listen,
goodness.
you can't get below the neck. Anything you say
No,
below the neck is going to
it's
get you in
not
trouble
safe.
as a man.
Right.
You say her
Right.
hands, her feet, her knees. I've always thought her knees look great.
That's just
Even
weird.
that just sounds creepy.
That's weird.
Okay. All right. Oh, you two are so funny. Okay, so let's talk about, because you're still honeymooning, it sounds like, and just enjoying each other.
I
And
hope so.
I saw your Facebook post that you had where you're on the back of the truck bed. I think that must have been your wedding
Oh.
day. I
Yes, that
love
was.
that picture. Someone captured just
Totally.
that, you were laughing. It was just such a beautiful picture. I just love that. But I know that most things that are valuable take a lot of hard work, and it's not always what it seems. So I wonder if you all could share with my listeners, as a married couple, what would be one thought that you don't want to consistently engage? I'm going to start with the negative. One thought that if you ruminate on that thought, it could be about marriage, about your spouse, about yourself in this relationship. What is a thought that you might see as like an invitation to a danger zone? Does that make sense as a question?
No, it makes a
think
lot of
so.
sense.
And I'd like to go first because this is something that I noticed somewhat recently, even, and I caught myself. But Cameron and I have both experienced, rocky relationships.
We both had prior marriages.
Failed marriages. So it was interesting, and I noticed myself doing it. I think we've had maybe like two handfuls of like what we would call like squabbles, or he calls them fights, from a relationship that I was in before marriage. It wasn't even close to any kind of fight. But whenever we have those moments, I immediately think to myself, it's over. We're not going to be able to recover from this. He's going to leave me. He's going to leave me.
And these aren't fights.
They're not. They're
not even like, what was the one that we laughed at the other day about your lasagna?
Oh yeah, I made an average lasagna.
It was nothing average about it. She forgot the ricotta cheese. So in her mind,
forget ricotta cheese in a lasagna.
And she had just sent me to the store to get the ricotta cheese. So I go to the store and I get it and I bring it home, and she forgets to put it in. Ridiculous. And then she goes into this, I wouldn't say a fit, but she gets sad. How much you try? She pouts.
No, I got the ricotta cheese. I forgot to put the egg in with the ricotta cheese, which doesn't.
Well, either way, the ricotta cheese didn't make it on the. The ricotta cheese didn't make it on lasagna.
No.
Okay.
No.
So, but the point is that she went into this kind of self-pity mode where she, and I think for her, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for her sometimes it's, well, I know for me, so I'll answer for me. I know that can be spiraling, right?
Yes.
You feel bad about yourself with one thing, and then, and then it kind of, you start to feel bad. Satan starts to bring your other weaknesses to your mind. You start spiraling down and down and down. And then I think add to that past relationships and things you've been told by your ex-spouse, where they like to remind you of your frailties and your weaknesses, even if some of them aren't frailties and weaknesses. So that's kind of what started happening. So we started arguing. We had a fight again. It was no more than this was really. But I'm getting frustrated because I'm like, you're getting so down on yourself because you forgot to put ricotta cheese in a lasagna. And I said, I promise you, it's going to be fantastic. And it was absolutely fantastic, but she couldn't get past that part. And so we kind of have this argument over, why do you get so down? Why are you so down on yourself over something so small? And when most of the time, and she knows this, and she will admit this, she is an incredible cook. She has worked for Wolfgang Puck. She has worked for Bobby Flay. I mean, she knows what she's doing. She'll get in the kitchen and she'll what do you call it? Play. I mean, where I have to go by recipes, right? She'll play. I think this could use some more cumin, or, oh no, some paprika over here. She'll make something fantastic. And the one time she has what she thinks is going to be a sub-average lasagna, we start to spiral, or she starts to. And then I get mad because I'm like, I can't believe you're spiraling over what you think is going to be average lasagna that turned out not to be. So,
and I think by spiraling, it is just kind of like, it's a mental process, and it's, it's not anything that's necessarily physical. It's all just, most of the time. And there have been some times that like I would have like a PTSD like moment, like, come into play. And to realize that, I'm becoming more self-aware, like of the trigger points, and just being able to communicate that with them. Yeah, I had one yesterday, and I immediately like recognized it and had to come back, and we talked about it. I was like, listen, this was nothing that you did. It was just something that just kind of sparked some PTSD. And so anyway, but
I would say almost, and I want to be careful how I say this, because I think discussing the past is important. I think her and I discussing past relationships and past failures is important, but I think we both have the tendency to dwell on those sometimes, even personally, because that's when I can spiral. When I think about some of the decisions I made in the past, whether they be relationship based or just life based, and how Satan can continue to kick that in my face, and I can just go into a depression. And I was even telling her the other day about sometimes where I'll feel so much shame over a decision I made. And this is before her, long before her, in one particular instance that I can think of, that usually would drive me to just utter so much shame that I would literally just have shakes. Like it wouldn't last long, but it'd be like I would just be shaking off the shame. But it's important that she and I have talked about those in the past, but when they come up, not letting them come up. Like for example, this one particular instance that I'm thinking of, and she knows what I'm talking about. We have talked about that. We have talked about it a lot. And it was important that we talk about it. I think it's also important that she feels free to ask me about it again and again, because it was something that brought a lot of doubt to her. Maybe not a lot, but some doubt about who I was as a person.
Right.
So I think it's important that she feels the freedom to ask me about it going forward, but I also think it's important that it not come up all the time, because that means she's dwelling on it, and that's going to make me dwell on it. At some point, you have to let your past go personally and let your spouse's past go, because if you don't, then you're not moving forward.
Oh, thank you both for being so transparent. It's so easy to relate to what you're saying. And I'm currently in a dating relationship, and I'm praising the Lord for that. And it's an exciting time for me. But kind of what you were saying about the past, yes, everything you said, yes. But what we call it Christmas past, because not all of our past is icky and shame-filled. Certainly some of it can be for all of us, but we say that's Christmas past. Although we both have freedom to talk to each other about it, much like you've said, we want to keep it in the perspective, because now we have Christmas present, and we're working toward Christmas future, a whole bunch of them, God willing. So that little Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future has given us kind of an orientation board to know, okay, we're spending a lot of time on Christmas past. Is that what we want to do right now? And it kind of helps us to shift. Sometimes we even say, ooh, that's Christmas past. Like, do you really want to go there? And just to kind of test the waters. But that's such a great example.
Susan and I both have a bad habit of going down rabbit holes.
Yes.
And so we'll if we start thinking, for example, if I start thinking about something that could make me jealous, right? Or instead of talking to her about it, letting her know this is how I feel, not talking to her about it, which is the bad thing. And then I start to spiral in my thoughts about, and eventually I always land on the worst case scenario, right? I never land on, oh, that's just a friend of hers, right? That's just a male friend that she works with, and they are friends, and that's safe and that's okay. I'll always wind up, she's having an affair, right? And that's a horrible place to go. And fortunately, I think now she and I are so newlywed, and still, as you said, Victoria's still in the honeymoon phase. So I don't think either of us go there much or allow ourselves to go there much, because I think a lot of it is we're still close. One of the things that we're constantly, I think, battling mentally is not letting resentment build up. Because I know from my prior relationships, my prior marriage, that's one of the things that ended that relationship, was there had been so much resentment build up on both sides, honestly, that there was without God, there was going to be no recovery. And as a result, and for whatever reason, God chose to not save that marriage, which I'm thankful for now, because I can't imagine it ever being better than what I have now. I can't imagine any relationship. I never had a relationship as good as this. But I think a lot of it is our experience. Like we both firmly believe it ought to be illegal to get married until you're 35 years old in this country, because you don't know enough to live with another fallen human being. And that's what you do when you get married. You are cohabitating with another sinful person. You don't know enough on how to deal with that when you're 20 years old or 24. And that's when I got married. I was an idiot, immature man at 24 years old. There's no chance that marriage had to succeed without God intervening. And then I look at us now, and yes, we're probably past the point where she and I are going to have kids together, even though we have a little 8-year-old in here. And that hurts. I mean, that does. That I wish we could, and we may. God may surprise us with a miracle. We're not exactly being careful about it, but that's another story. So it's one of those things where, but what comes with that is a lot of maturity and a lot of, like the other day, the thing that she just mentioned that kind of set her off with her PTSD with a past relationship. Instead of her holding on to that in anger, she came in after taking a shower. We were going to go to the store together. And I said, hey, why are we fighting about this? I don't get it. And she said, well, I wanted to talk to you about that. She said, this is a PTSD thing. She goes, it's not your fault. And then we had a discussion. And in that discussion, not only did I feel better about why we were fighting about it and that we really weren't fighting about it, but I immediately felt closer to her. And I think that's a lot of things that are overlooked, is that fights and disagreements, if we will both come to the table, we will get closer than we were before we had ever fought in the first place. Because I don't know whether it builds trust or whether it builds humanity or humanness or whatever, but it just makes us closer. Is that, you know, and we used to have that conversation all the time. It's like, how real is it? Because we didn't fight we didn't have a fight for the first year of our relationship, not marriage, but our relationship. There was not a single, nothing. I mean, we just, and we even came to the point like, is this real? Something's wrong, because we should have had at least one knockdown drag out, and we haven't even had that. Now, eventually we did, but it was like, we don't fight a lot. And it's very different from the first one I had.
Yes.
Where we fought all the time. And so I guess I'm answering a lot of those, but to me, it's, you know, being willing to have those fights, but also being willing to come back to the table and talk about them instead of ignoring them. And as she well knows, my instinct during a fight is to withdraw. And she's had to fight me against that. She's had to fight. No, I remember one time we were having a squabble, and it was bedtime. And I got mad, got my feelings hurt probably. And I just grabbed I have a big body pillow that she hates because she says it comes between she and I.
Two other people in the bed.
Anyway, I call her Susie just so it's close to her name. So anyway, so I grabbed my body pillow and I just kind of skulked downstairs to the downstairs bedroom. Well, and one of the sweetest things she's ever done, because we had just had counseling about this. That's another thing I think we need to talk about, that we started going to marriage counseling day one of our marriage, basically, without any trouble. And it was so funny that when she told her mom that she was going to counseling, her instant reaction was, what's wrong with you and Cameron? And her, nothing's wrong. This is what we should be doing. And so we started going to counseling quickly and early, which we're both thankful for. And we still do. We've got an appointment a couple of weeks. And so, but anyway, so I went downstairs. We had just had a counseling appointment, and our marriage counselor basically said, Cameron, you can't withdraw. And I don't know what she told you, but it was my homework was not to withdraw in fights. But I don't know what her homework assignment was, but what she did was I withdrew, went downstairs, was going to sleep downstairs and not deal with the issue. She pursued me, came downstairs in this very sweet voice. She wasn't angry. There wasn't any manipulation in what she said. There wasn't any sarcasm what she said, but in this very sweet voice, she said, you're not supposed to run away when we fight. And she said it so sweetly that I couldn't do anything other than say, you're right. And I got up and I hugged her and we went back upstairs, and I guess we dealt with it quickly, then went to bed, and then got up and dealt with it in a bigger way the next morning. But all because she came down and said, no, I'm not going to let you withdraw.
But I think one of the biggest things that Cameron has taught me in our relationship is that I think both of us apologize very quickly. We don't let too much time pass before we say, I'm sorry. And I think that's really important. And we try not to hold on to those, like those grudges. And I know that I've been guilty of that in the past, and we just let them snowball and snowball, and that's what forms resentment.
Right.
But I think one thing that I am not used to at all, I've never had it in any other relationship, is that Cameron is constantly saying, like, what can I do better? Like, tell me how I can help you. And I think, like, does he really mean that, or is that just the right thing to say?
Both.
And it's taken some time to adjust, but honestly, going to your partner and saying, how can I be better for you? And then being able to think about it and honestly make a decision very early in a relationship. I am going to love you, and I'm going to do everything that I can to be the best partner and teammate for you. And I would say, like, we've let each other down before.
Oh yeah, and we will again.
But we always come back and say, okay, oh, I messed up, or this is something that I could have done better, and I'm sorry. So I don't know, that's different for me than any other relationship. It's always, I got out of a relationship, everything was, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? And that doesn't feel good ever.
Well, and I think a lot of that too goes back to, for me personally, having that attitude, which is the same attitude she has. Don't let her get you wrong. She has the same attitude of, how can I be better and what can I do for you? We're both empaths. Which is a word I never used on myself until she said it to me. Like, you realize you're an empath? I'm like, am I? She's like, oh yeah, you're an empath. So am I. And then and then all of a sudden I realized I did reading on what empaths were. And I'm like, oh yes, I exactly am an empath. So you got two empaths living together. Well, that sounds wonderful. And it is wonderful, but it can also lead to, it's the reason we probably apologize all the time. And sometimes maybe too much, because
we can be sensitive with each other.
Yeah.
Did I mess up?
What did I do wrong? Yeah. But it's one of those things where our past relationships, I think, taught us, because I remember in my first marriage, it led to a lot of marital counseling, which taught me a whole lot. Now, I went begrudgingly at first, but then I started realizing the wisdom that these counselors and therapists have, and especially marriage counselors. There is a lot of, and again, I go back to, and we shouldn't allow people to get married until they've gone through a year worth of marriage counseling, because you learn how to fight fair, which was a new concept to me. You learn that people's feelings, not maybe their thinking, but people's feelings are always valid. That as easy it is, you never tell someone that they're crazy. Right. And you may not mean that they're crazy, but you mean you're not thinking clearly now. Right. But in an ignorant man's mind, that comes out of, you're crazy. You don't ever say that to somebody, because that person may have heard that a lot in their prior relationship. And that may be a trigger for them. And the bottom line, you just don't say it anyway, because it's not ever what you're really trying to say based on how it's defined in the world today. It's just one of those things where my prior relationships, but specifically my marriage, taught me so much about how to cohabitate with another fallen human being, how to be fair to them, how to watch out for trigger words, how to watch out for me, and not having to walk on eggshells. And I think more importantly, anytime I felt something was unfair, is instead of letting it build, as Susan said a few minutes ago, go to them and let's dig this out. Let's talk about it now, so that we're not going weeks with you carrying a load of anger and then eventually resentment. You don't want that callus to ever form.
Wow, this is such amazing encouragement, I think. And I so appreciate your transparency. And one thing I keep thinking in my mind is the level of honesty that you have with one another is so impressive. And I think it's critical to building that a healthy relationship. It takes a lot of courage, though, just to be honest. And so I really see that coming loud and clear.
Courage, Victoria. I think it took a lot of courage at the beginning of our relationship. I think the longer we're together, the less courage it takes to be honest, because we start to trust each other and trust that they're going to handle it the way we hoped they would handle it. Like I remember like a big thing I needed to tell her before we got married, before we made a commitment. I was terrified. And to be fair, it was a big thing about my past that I full well expected her to, in fairness, to walk away from me because of. And in fairness to her, she even said that she considered it. How would you put that?
No, it was, we had talked about it one night, and we were just sitting on the couch. We were watching TV, and
I knew
it was like, okay, yeah. And we had gotten to the point where it's like, okay, we were really talking about becoming more serious and where this might lead. And so this was something that he felt like, and he should have like shared with me. We needed to talk about it. So I remember when he left that night, we talked about it for a while.
Oh yeah.
And
well, it was a lot to talk about.
And so when he left that night, he said, I remember it. He said, "Are we okay?" And I said, "I have a lot to think about. I have a lot to process,"
which was terrifying to hear, but fair.
So, and I think we were supposed to see each other two nights from that point or whatever. And I remember I just felt nauseous, and I was like, I can't lose this man. And going back to the part that we're fallen human beings, and we've all had things that, you know, have crept up in our past that we're not necessarily proud of, but I also feel like we can take those things and grow from them. And I really felt like Cameron had, and he was remorseful, so remorseful about it. And so a couple of, when we were supposed to get together, a couple nights from that, he said, I said, what time are you coming over? And he said, "Do you still want me to come over?" And I said, "Absolutely." So, and I told him, I think we talked about it. I said, I may have more questions. I may want to talk about this more. And he said, "You can ask me anything that you want to ask me." But I knew, God, within 24 hours, I knew that I could not lose this man.
That was a long 24 hours, by the way.
But I couldn't lose him.
Yeah, I bet it was a long time. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yes, that sounds like a beautiful picture of grace, and I appreciate your sharing that. Even that takes a lot of courage. And I want to be mindful of our time, but I didn't know if there was, and maybe you could both answer this together, or one of you.
Alex,
maybe
can you let Henry out?
Have Sorry. Oh, that's okay. Is Henry your dog?
Yes, I tried to get him up here on my lap. He could stand, but he weighs 90 pounds. So.
Oh gosh. But so is there one thought that you would say would be critical for you all to have? And you kind of answered this already, just not specifically as in terms of a thought, but is there something that you should really focus on within your marriage as you consider each other or the relationship itself? Does anything spring to mind? And if it doesn't, that's okay too.
Like personally, that she and I should consider and
think
like about in our marriage?
To say, let's have a quote, successful, God-honoring marriage. This is something you want to think about often. Like, I know that you all encourage each other because I saw the sticky notes that you all do. And it made me think of the power of the words that you're affirming over each other. But is there a practice like that, or some thought that you have repeatedly or should energize within a relationship? Like, and I don't know what it might be, but it could be like, God, you've graced me with this wonderful gift of a man, or I don't know what it might be, but does anything come to mind?
I would say this, and I'm going to mention this and let you talk about the second part because you're the one that introduced me more to it. But Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, I think has been kind of our second Bible in a way, because we both know, even though I always forget what her other love language is, I know what her first one is, because same as mine, which is words of encouragement. That has been like eye-opening to me, because I'll let you share in a minute. But the other one to me, now I'm going to go blank. Talk about that for a minute. Let me think what I was going to say.
Yeah. So early on when we were dating, I had mentioned, I was like, "Do you know the 5 love languages?" And he's like, "Yeah."
I've spent years in ministry, dear. Of course, I know what the 5 love languages are.
So I said, "What's yours?" He goes, I don't know.
I don't know. It's all pop Christianity.
So I was like, let me get the book. So he just kind of laughed about the whole thing. But at first
I was being cool. I was trying to be cool and act like I'm well aware of the 5 love languages. And then she gets them out and we start going through them. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know nearly as well as I thought I did. To the point where I've been married to a woman a year and a half. I still can't remember her second one.
Acts of service.
Acts of service. There we go.
So we have words of affirmation. And so it's interesting. I think that we continue to do those affirmations to each other, and maybe not even necessarily, because a lot of times those words of affirmations, like to ourselves, turn into words of affirmation to the other person, especially in a loving relationship. It's like, I am good enough for God, and this is the man that God wants me to be with. And so it's just recognizing those kinds of things. And that I think, I don't know, it is honest. I never thought about it that way, actually.
Oh, I think it's an easy, brilliant answer to a question, is that's like, and at this point, I think a lot of it's muscle memory, because you, without a doubt, know that what mine is words of encouragement. And you do that all the time, but that's where those Post-its came from, is us finding a way to find places where we know the other one would find it. So, and typically it's our bathroom mirror, where, I've got, and we've still got them. If I went back and took a picture of our bathroom mirror, there's about 20 on my side that she gave me and about 20 on her side that I gave her. And it's one of those things that I know I do it when I feel like, okay, I want her to know how I feel, but telling her how I feel right now just doesn't seem like enough. Writing it down and sticking it somewhere so I'm telling her quietly seems more poignant somehow to me. And I think that's where it started. It was like, it's like when you send someone flowers, and there's a note attached to it most of the time. And knowing that the written word is more powerful than the spoken word. I mean, what woman wouldn't want, or person for that matter, wouldn't want a love letter sent to them as opposed to a love speech? What is a love speech? It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a love speech. A love letter exists for a reason, because the woman or the person can go back to that and reread those words over and over in moments where they need that encouragement. And so that's kind of where the Post-it started. I still can't remember what I was going to say. I would say this, as far as what's important, Victoria, and I will say this, admitting full well, especially recently, that I have failed horribly in this matter, but I've done a poor job of getting us to church on Sunday mornings, even if we can't make it to church. We go to Buck Run Baptist Church in Frankfort, Kentucky, and our pastor who married us, Herschel York, is one of the greatest preachers in the country. He actually teaches preaching at Southern Baptist Seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. And I actively see a difference in our relationship and in our week when we are at church together. And sadly, it's probably been months since we've been there. Now, part of that, this is a lame excuse, because it hasn't happened enough for us to be gone as long as we have. But part of that has been when I get to go preach on Sunday mornings to other churches, but that's only happened maybe 4 or 5 times, maybe 3 or 4. But I would say that's one of the biggest things that I notice, and that I will actively admit that I failed. That when Alex goes with us, it goes to children's church, but the two of us are sitting hand in hand with our Bibles open, worshiping together. It's one of the most important things that I think we do as a family, and we haven't done it enough recently, and that's 100% my fault.
Well, I love your Post-it example, and I love that you see that every morning, I'm assuming, or virtually. And
I think sometimes we know that they're there, so we ignore them. We don't read. We tend to stop reading them, I think, sometimes, because, well, that's just part of our mirror. And at some point, it's going to be nothing but Post-its, I assume. We won't have a mirror. And that's when we'll start taking them down, maybe rereading them.
Yeah. Well, if you did read them every day, I would probably, I know what you mean. They get familiar to you.
Yeah, just got to eat. It's blind.
But I was just thinking about the impact on your brain, like to read that and energize that over and over and over again. It gets so deep seated into your brain that it becomes, what you focus on grows, and that's where the energy goes. And so that's such a good concrete example, even no matter what the thoughts are, that that you may be having, those particular life-giving, love-affirming kind of thoughts are so healthy and energizing within the marriage. And thank you also for sharing about church, because Cameron and Susan, I mean, you know that it's a privilege to be a Christian, and the privilege to be able to worship with someone you love is it. Oh my goodness. I've never had that in my life. And that's one of the most exciting components of my relationship now with my boyfriend, is the fact that we are Christians and we're pursuing God together, and that I can sit in a church service next to someone. We're enjoying the same praise and worship music. We're hearing the same message. We're elbowing each other. We're squeezing our hands. It's meaningful in a way that is, well, it's spiritually meaningful and profound. And it is such a privilege. And so I would challenge you, yes, get back into church, and you won't be sorry. But anyway, oh, what a delightful time with you all. I love it that you're just so real and transparent, and because the stories that you have shared and your relationship, these things are what other people can kind of hang on to, and they think, if Susan and Cameron can do this, even though sometimes it may be a little bit bumpy, they are willing to learn. They're sinking their teeth in. They're not going to focus on thoughts like it's over, it's all done, or that kind of catastrophic thinking that goes down the rabbit hole and spirals down. No, they're going to pull back, communicate, be honest and transparent, and encourage each other and ask each other, what can I do to be better, to be your better mate? I mean, you all have brought so many inspirational little tidbits and nuggets to the conversation. So I really appreciate that. And I want everyone to know where they can contact you. Susan, your art; Cameron, your ministry. If really quickly you could give us some details on that, and I'll put all of that in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Art is kind of a therapy for me too. So I have like a Susan Mills art studio. One of my biggest passions, and it was on a recent podcast of Victoria's, is my Autism Tribe. And it's a nonprofit that I developed or created a few years ago. And it is dedicated for the autism community, and bringing awareness and inclusivity to the communities around us. And that's myautismtribe.org.
Thank you so much. Cameron?
I did painting.
Oh, did you? I guess it's hard to say where they can find it.
SusanMillsArtStudio.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my ministry is cmm21.com, which stands for Cameron Mills Ministry. And then my number at UK was 21, as you see in the background. Though I think that looks like 12 or 15 or something now, if it's reversed. But I've been doing that for 24 years, I think, since 1998, whatever many years that is. And it's what I'm called to do. I've got another job that pays my bills, or pays our bills. And, but that's what I feel called to do, and will do in some form or another the rest of my life. But I just travel around and speak at churches. I fill pulpits when pastors are on vacation or they're sick, as was in the case last weekend. And it's something I've always just felt like this is what I'm supposed to do. So that's cmm21.com. It's on Cameron Mills Ministries and on Facebook as well. And that's the best way to get in touch.
Very good. Well, thank you both for appearing on the show. You're just awesome, just incredible individuals, and I appreciate it so much. God bless you.
You too. Thank you.
It's a wrap, Brain Changer. And until next time, Dios primero y que Dios te bendiga. Ciao.